Christmas Eve at Celestial Heights was supposed to be magical. The five-star restaurant perched on the 40th floor offered panoramic views of the city skyline, with twinkling lights stretching endlessly in every direction. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in ivory linens, and the soft sounds of a live pianist filled the elegant dining room. But magic was the last thing I felt as I sat across from my family, listening to my brother Marcus explain why I didn't belong here. "Seriously, Jordan, look around," Marcus said, gesturing broadly with his wine glass. "The prix-fixe menu alone is $300 per person. The wine we're drinking costs more than you probably make in a week." My mother, Patricia, nodded sympathetically. "Marcus is right, honey. We don't want you to feel pressured to spend money you don't have. We could have gone somewhere more appropriate for your budget." My sister-in-law, Jennifer, chimed in with her perfectly practiced concerned expression. "We just want you to be comfortable, Jordan. There's no shame in having financial limitations." I took a sip of the very expensive wine they were discussing and looked around the restaurant I'd been coming to since I was 12 years old. The same restaurant where I'd had my first business dinner 7 years ago. The same restaurant where I'd signed my biggest real estate deal 3 years ago. The same restaurant I'd owned for the past 18 months. "I appreciate your concern," I said calmly, cutting into my Wagyu beef. "But I'm perfectly comfortable here." Marcus laughed, that condescending sound I'd grown so tired of hearing. "Comfortable? Jordan, you work as a property manager for some small apartment complex. You drive a 15-year-old Honda. You live in a studio apartment. How exactly are you comfortable spending $600 on dinner?" The truth was, I drove the Honda because it was reliable and I liked it. I lived in the studio apartment because it was in a building I owned and I enjoyed the simplicity. And I worked as a property manager because I was actually managing a portfolio worth approximately $47 million. But my family didn't need to know any of that. At least they hadn't needed to know until tonight. "Marcus," my father Robert said in his authoritative voice, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." "No, Dad, this needs to be said," Marcus continued, clearly emboldened by the wine and what he perceived as family support. "Jordan has been struggling for years, and we keep enabling her by including her in these expensive family traditions. Maybe it's time for some tough love." Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. "Marcus and I have been talking about this. We think Jordan needs to understand that success requires sacrifice and hard work. She can't keep coasting through life expecting us to subsidize her lifestyle." I almost choked on my wine. "Subsidize my lifestyle? They only knew. What exactly do you propose?" I asked, genuinely curious about where this was heading. "Well," Marcus leaned forward, clearly having rehearsed this speech, "we think you should skip these expensive family gatherings until you get your finances in order. Focus on building a real career instead of whatever it is you're doing now." "A real career," I repeated slowly. "Something with growth potential," Jennifer added helpfully. "Maybe go back to school, get an MBA, learn some marketable skills. Marcus could probably help you get an entry-level position at his firm." Marcus worked at a mid-tier commercial real estate brokerage. He made decent money, around $150,000 a year, which he considered wildly successful. He had no idea that I'd bought and sold properties worth more than his annual salary in single transactions. "That's very generous of you," I said. "What kind of entry-level position were you thinking?" "Well, you'd start as an assistant, obviously," Marcus explained. "Filing, answering phones, maybe some basic data entry. It would be a good way to learn the business from the ground up." The irony was almost too much to bear. Marcus wanted to offer me an entry-level position in an industry where I was already one of the most successful investors in the city. "You know what, Marcus? That's an interesting proposition. Let me think about it." Our waiter, Thomas, approached the table. I'd known Thomas for years. He'd been working at Celestial Heights since long before I bought the place. He was discreet, professional, and had never once indicated to my family that he knew me as anything other than a customer. "How is everything this evening?" Thomas asked politely. "Excellent as always," my father replied. "Though I have to ask, we've been coming here for years and I've always wondered who owns this place. It's so well managed." Thomas glanced at me almost imperceptibly. "The restaurant is owned by Meridian Property Group," he said smoothly. "They've been wonderful to work for." Meridian Property Group was my company. I'd named it after the street where I'd bought my first investment property 8 years ago. "Meridian Property Group," my mother mused. "I've never heard of them. Are they a large company?" They're quite successful in the commercial real estate sector, Thomas replied diplomatically. They own several high-end properties throughout the city. Marcus perked up at this. Commercial real estate? I might know some people there. What's the CEO's name? Thomas looked at me again and I gave him the slightest shake of my head. I believe the CEO prefers to keep a low profile, Thomas said. Very private person. After Thomas left, Marcus continued his lecture about my life choices. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, he said, gesturing around the restaurant. We're sitting in a place owned by someone who actually understands business, who's built something substantial. Meanwhile, you're content to just exist. Maybe she's happy with her simple life, my mother said, though not unkindly. Not everyone needs to be ambitious, Marcus. But she could be so much more, Jennifer insisted. Jordan is smart enough, she just lacks direction and motivation. I finished my wine and considered my options. I could continue letting them believe what they wanted to believe, maintaining the peaceful status quo that had worked for years. Or I could end this particular conversation once and for all. You know what, Marcus? You're absolutely right. He looked surprised. I am. Yes. I should probably be more ambitious. I should think bigger, take more risks, build something substantial. Exactly. Marcus said, clearly pleased that his tough love approach was working. It's never too late to start building a real future. You're so right, I agreed, reaching into my purse. In fact, I should probably start by showing you all something I've been working on. I pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table next to the bread basket. What's that? My father asked. Just some paperwork related to a little project I've been involved in, I said casually, opening the folder. The first document was the deed to the building we were currently sitting in. 47 floors of prime downtown real estate, including Celestial Heights Restaurant, purchased by Meridian Property Group 18 months ago for $23 million. I slid the deed across the table to Marcus, who picked it up and began reading. I watched his face change from confidence to confusion to complete shock. This says. He started, then stopped and read again. This says Meridian Property Group owns this building. That's correct, I said, pulling out the next document. But Thomas just said. Marcus looked around wildly as if the restaurant might provide answers. Thomas said the restaurant is owned by Meridian Property Group, I confirmed. Which it is. I handed him the second document, the corporate filing papers for Meridian Property Group, clearly listing Jordan Patricia Morrison as founder and CEO. The silence at our table was deafening. My parents leaned over to see what Marcus was looking at, and I watched their expressions mirror his journey from confusion to disbelief. Jordan, my mother said slowly, what exactly is this? This is my company, Mom. I founded Meridian Property Group 6 years ago. We specialize in acquiring and managing high-end commercial real estate. But you said you were a property manager, Jennifer stammered. I am a property manager, I replied. I manage properties. Just more properties than you realized. I pulled out the third document, a portfolio summary showing all of Meridian's current holdings. 15 commercial properties including this building, 2 hotels, an office complex and several luxury apartment buildings. Total portfolio value, $47 million. Marcus stared at the papers like they might disappear if he blinked. This can't be real. It's quite real, I said, signaling Thomas, who approached immediately. Yes, Ms. Morrison? The use of my name caused another ripple of shock around the table. Thomas, could you please bring us a bottle of the 2015 Bordeaux from the private reserve? The one we discussed last week. Of course, Ms. Morrison. Right away. After Thomas left, my family sat in stunned silence. The private reserve? My father finally asked. I keep a small collection of wines here for special occasions, I explained. Tonight seems like a good time to break one out. Jordan, my mother said, her voice barely above a whisper, how long have you owned this restaurant? 18 months. Though I've been a regular customer for much longer, obviously. Marcus was still staring at the portfolio summary. It says here you own the Grandview Hotel. I do. And the Pacific Office Tower. Also mine. The Meridian Luxury Apartments. I named the company after that building, actually. It was my first major acquisition. Jennifer looked like she might faint. But how? Why didn't you tell us? You never asked, I said simply. And to be honest, I was curious to see how you'd treat me if you thought I was unsuccessful. The wine arrived, and Thomas made a show of presenting it properly before opening it with practiced precision. He poured a small amount for me to taste, and I nodded my approval. "Excellent choice as always, Ms. Morrison," he said, filling our glasses. After he left, Marcus finally found his voice. "So when I offered you an entry-level job at my firm, you offered someone who owns $47 million in real estate a position answering phones and filing papers," I finished. "Yes, that was interesting." "Oh my God," Jennifer said, covering her face with her hands. "We told you that you needed to learn about business and get some marketable skills. You did indeed." My father, who had been quiet through most of the revelations, finally spoke. "Jordan, I don't understand. Why the secrecy? Why let us think you were struggling?" I took a sip of the exceptional wine and considered how to answer. "Dad, do you remember when I was in college and I told you I wanted to study real estate and investment?" "Vaguely. You told me it was a man's field, that I should focus on something more suitable for women. Marketing maybe, or teaching." My father's face reddened slightly. "That was different times, Jordan. I was trying to protect you. And Marcus, do you remember when I graduated and told you I was interested in commercial real estate?" Marcus nodded reluctantly. "You laughed. You said I didn't have the connections or the capital to succeed in commercial real estate. You suggested I get a job as someone's assistant and maybe work my way up over 10 or 15 years. "I was trying to be realistic," Marcus said defensively. "And Mom, when I bought my first investment property 8 years ago, a small duplex, what did you say?" My mother looked uncomfortable. "I said it seemed risky. That you should focus on stable employment instead of speculating in real estate." "Right. So when I started having success, when I began acquiring larger properties and building my portfolio, I decided to keep it quiet. I wanted to see if my family would support me and believe in me without knowing about my financial success." The painful truth hung in the air between us. "Instead," I continued, "I discovered that when you thought I was struggling, you saw me as someone who needed tough love and basic life advice. When you thought I wasn't successful, you decided I shouldn't participate in family traditions because I couldn't afford them." "We were trying to help," Jennifer said weakly. "Were you? Or were you trying to feel superior?" Marcus set down his wine glass heavily. "That's not fair, Jordan. Isn't it? Tonight you told me I was coasting through life and needed to understand that success requires sacrifice and hard work. You offered me an entry-level job in an industry where I'm already more successful than you'll probably ever be." "We didn't know," my mother said, tears forming in her eyes. "You didn't know because you never bothered to really ask about my life or my work. You made assumptions based on superficial observations and then treated me according to those assumptions." Thomas approached our table again. "Excuse me, Ms. Morrison, but the kitchen wanted me to inform you that they've prepared a special dessert course this evening. Should I have them serve it now?" "That would be lovely, Thomas. Thank you." As Thomas walked away, my father shook his head in amazement. "The staff all know you." "Of course they do. I'm here at least twice a week for business dinners. I've gotten to know everyone who works here." "Business dinners," Marcus repeated slowly. "What kind of business dinners?" I pulled out my phone and showed them my calendar for the past week. Monday, I met with architects about renovating the lobby of the Pacific Tower. Tuesday, I had dinner with the mayor's development committee about a new mixed-use project. Wednesday, I negotiated the purchase of a small hotel chain. Thursday, I closed on a waterfront property that I'm converting into luxury condos. Jennifer stared at my phone. "You had dinner with the mayor?" "His development committee, yes. The city is very interested in working with developers who focus on sustainable, community-minded projects." The dessert course arrived. An elaborate presentation of chocolate and gold leaf that was clearly designed to impress. As we ate in relative silence, I could see my family processing everything they'd learned. Finally, Marcus spoke up. "Jordan, I owe you an apology." "We all do," my mother added quickly. "Yes, you do," I agreed. "But more importantly, you owe yourself some reflection on why you made the assumptions you made." "What do you mean?" my father asked. "You saw someone driving an old car and living in a small apartment, and you immediately assumed that person was unsuccessful and needed your guidance. You never considered that maybe those choices were intentional, or that success might look different than you expected." I gestured around the restaurant. "I could drive a Ferrari and live in a mansion. I could certainly afford it. But I prefer to invest my money in assets that generate income rather than expenses that drain it." "That's actually very smart," Jennifer admitted. "It's the foundation of building wealth." I said. Something I learned by studying successful investors, not by working my way up from filing papers at someone else's company. Marcus looked genuinely chastened. I feel like an idiot. You're not an idiot, Marcus. But you did make the mistake of assuming that your path to success is the only valid path. So what happens now? My mother asked. How do we move forward from this? I considered the question seriously. That depends on you. Are you willing to accept that I might know something about business and success? Are you willing to treat me as an equal rather than someone who needs your guidance and approval? Of course, my father said immediately. Jordan, we're incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. Are you proud of what I've accomplished, or are you proud that I'm wealthy? The distinction clearly hadn't occurred to him. Because, I continued, if you're only proud of me now that you know I'm financially successful, then we still have a problem. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Jordan, we should have been proud of you regardless. We should have supported you and believed in you whether you were successful or struggling. Yes, you should have. Can you forgive us? She asked. I can forgive you. But I need you to understand that respect isn't something you earn through wealth. It's something you give to people because they're human beings who deserve it. Marcus nodded solemnly. You're right. We treated you poorly, and it had nothing to do with money and everything to do with our own prejudices and assumptions. That's a good start, I said. As we finished dessert and prepared to leave, Thomas approached with the check. Out of habit, my father reached for it, but I intercepted. I've got this, I said. Jordan, you don't need to, Marcus started. Marcus, I interrupted gently, I own the restaurant. I think I can handle the check. As we walked toward the elevator, my family still seemed to be processing everything they'd learned. The revelation that their unsuccessful daughter was actually a millionaire real estate mogul was clearly going to take some time to fully absorb. In the elevator, Jennifer finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Jordan, what made you want to get into real estate? I've always been fascinated by the idea that you can create value by improving spaces and bringing communities together, I said. Every property I buy, I ask myself, how can I make this better? How can I make it serve the community more effectively? Is that why you bought this building? Partly. But mainly because Celestial Heights was struggling under its previous ownership. The building was underutilized and the restaurant wasn't reaching its potential. I saw an opportunity to preserve something beautiful while making it more successful. And the other properties? Each one was a puzzle to solve. The Grandview Hotel was a classic property that needed modernization. The Pacific Tower was an office building that could benefit from mixed-use development. The Meridian Apartments were luxury units in a neighborhood that was just starting to gentrify. My father listened intently. You're not just buying and selling. You're actually developing and improving communities. That's the goal. Anyone can flip properties for quick profits. I'm more interested in creating long-term value. As we reached the ground floor and walked toward the parking garage, Marcus asked, "What's your next project?" I'm looking at a waterfront area that's been underdeveloped for years. The city wants to see mixed-use development that includes affordable housing, retail spaces, and public areas. It's a complex project, but it could really transform that part of the city. That sounds incredible, my mother said. How did you learn to do all of this? Books, mentors, trial and error, and a lot of careful analysis, I replied. The same way anyone learns anything complex. When we reached our cars, we stood in the parking garage for a moment, the evening air cool after the warmth of the restaurant. Jordan, my father said, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not because of your financial success, but because of the thoughtful, strategic way you've built your business. You're creating something meaningful. Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. Marcus stepped forward. And I want to formally withdraw my job offer, he said with a self-deprecating smile. I think you're probably overqualified. Just slightly, I agreed, laughing. But seriously, he continued, I'd love to learn from you. Maybe you could show me some of your properties sometime? I feel like I could learn a lot about real estate development from watching how you approach it. I'd like that, I said, and I meant it. As we prepared to go our separate ways, my mother hugged me tightly. I'm sorry we almost missed seeing how amazing you are, she whispered. You didn't miss it, I told her. You're seeing it now. Driving home in my reliable Honda, I reflected on the evening. My family had learned an important lesson about assumptions and respect, and I had learned that sometimes you have to reveal your hand to change the game. But most importantly, we had all learned that success comes in many forms, and that the most valuable thing you can give someone is not financial advice or tough love, but simply the belief that they're capable of great things. The city lights sparkled below as I drove through downtown, past several buildings that I owned, toward my small studio apartment that I loved. Tomorrow I would continue building my empire, one thoughtful investment at a time. But tonight I was just grateful that my family finally knew who I really was. 2 weeks later, Marcus called me with an unusual request. "Jordan, I know this might sound crazy, but would you consider letting me work with you on that waterfront development project? I could take a leave of absence from my firm. I want to learn how to do what you do. Are you sure you want to start at the bottom, learning from your little sister?" "I'm sure, Jordan. I'm ready to actually listen this time." 6 months later, we broke ground on the Morrison waterfront development, a mixed-use community that would include affordable housing, retail spaces, and a public park. The project was featured in the city's planning magazine, with a photo of Marcus and me standing in hard hats next to the construction sign. The caption read, "Local developers Jordan and Marcus Morrison bring family business approach to community development." Marcus framed the article and hung it in his new office at Meridian Property Group. It was right next to a photo from last Christmas dinner at Celestial Heights, a much happier family portrait taken after all the secrets were finally revealed. In the photo we're all raising our glasses in a toast. But if you look closely you can see we're not just celebrating the holiday. We're celebrating the understanding that success isn't about what you drive or where you live or how much money you make. It's about building something meaningful, treating people with respect, and having the courage to see beyond assumptions. And sometimes, it's about owning the restaurant where your family learns those lessons.